It's a nice vest, Carolyn. I want one of those vests. All right. Welcome back to open session of the Palo Alto Unified Board of Education meeting. The board met in closed session and took action on 2 items. Regarding item PAUSD SE 20-21.03, the board took action unanimously to approve a settlement agreement in relation to a special education student in the sum of $172,250. The board did not discuss item PAUSD SE 20-21.04. The board also approved by a vote of 5-0 the settlement agreement in the matter of employee discipline dismissal release HR 0622221191. And that was our closed session meeting. Now let's move on to the superintendent's report. Oh, let's actually approve the agenda order.
Yes.
Do I have a motion?
I move we approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
All right, so moved by Dr. DiBrienza, seconded by Mr. Collins.
All right, Dr. DiBrienza,
Aye.
Mr. Collins,
Aye.
Ms. Latimerrick,
Aye.
Mr. Dauber,
Aye.
Mr. Drop.
Aye. All right, now we can move on to Dr. Austin's report.
Thank you. First, some quick housekeeping and thanks to our executive cabinet team. I'd like to report satisfactory evaluations for Sharon Ophik, Lana Conway, Ann Brown, Carolyn Chow, and Trent Bahadur Singh. And just to avoid confusion, Derek Moore also did, but he's on a different contract. The others, this triggers a step, which is why I called them out. And now I've spent more time talking about Derek than the others together, so sorry about that. Thanks to the team, and our evaluation system is pretty robust. Each of the evaluations is lengthy and also leads to a conversation, and I'm really excited about our future. Next, we've also done evaluations with each of our principals, all in mostly in person. And if you're a principal in our district, you come in and you meet with me and Mr. Bahadur Singh, and then depending on your level, sometimes it involves Ms. Lawrence, Ms. Ophik, and Ms. Brown. So those all included a self-reflection piece and then a conversation with each of the principals. And I do just want to spend a moment on that because I think some things struck me during the process. I just want to share. We have thanked, and rightfully so, our teachers and classified staff extensively. But I think we have not taken the time to publicly thank our principals at the same level. And it was clear after sitting through these meetings and talking to them that the last year and a half impacted them as well and pretty deeply. And I thought about that and how did we miss that? But really, how did I miss that? And I had to really reflect on that. And decisions over the last year and a half started being made at the national level. So we'd see something on the news, and that's before Dr. Fauci was a household name, and you'd watch these things start to unfold. And then the states would jump in, and we would see our governor, and sometimes our governor was dead on, and sometimes it felt like he was just thinking out loud and saying whatever was popping into his head. But some of those things that popped into his head were pretty big, like closing schools for an extended period of time when we thought it was going to be a couple weeks. Then our county health departments would make decisions. And what we found is county health had more authority than, in some cases, the President of the United States, and certainly our governor. And our county tended to be more restrictive, and all counties had to change on a dime for a variety of reasons. Then finally at that level, the district administration would bring to you for consideration plans to implement changes, sometimes midstream, sometimes a day after we thought we had a plan, something would change and we'd come back. But often we overlooked that it was the principals who had the role of working with their site staff closest to our students to make these things actually happen. And all the way, they had to be optimistic, empathetic, and yet hold a hard line with people that they're going to see every day for years and years to come beyond this period of time. And often, in this, I think people just really need to give our principals some grace. They were trying to process things themselves, and it didn't always make sense to them either. And in some cases, they had real conflicts in their own personal lives about what we were doing and the state of health in our school systems and across the country. So I just want to say to our principals, we owe them gratitude and respect. They earned it. Thanks to our site admin teams, which includes our assistant principals as well. We would not have done this without you. And I think we've done a really good job of thanking most people, and I feel like they've been left out. And that should not be the case, so thank you. Last couple things. You will be hearing more about our neighbor Ravenswood. Ravenswood was just certified as a community-funded, or in old terms, basic aid school district. That's going to come as a surprise to a lot of people who are hearing that. It came to a surprise for us a week ago when we heard it, as it was equally a surprise for all of the school districts that are involved in the Tinsley program. Without getting too into the weeds on this, it does create an immediate issue for all of us to have to work through. The funding model didn't exist when the Tinsley case was settled in the mid-1980s. So there is no provision for passing through funding from a basic aid school district. In fact, when this all began around 1979, Ravenswood was as far from what we would now see as a basic aid as you can get. But you know, East Palo Alto is a different place in some segments now, and this is not a thing that you apply for. This is simply a math problem, and when it tips into basic aid, you're basic aid. What does that mean for us right now? Means that we need to have a legislative fix for this problem, or the funding that has come through to our school district, roughly $3.5 million, is now a zero. So this is not a panic time. It's a time, though, that says we do have a serious issue to collectively solve in the spirit in which the original case was settled, which calls for cooperation with all the school districts. So, you know, we're hoping to work through that. It also says that no school district should be financially harmed by the settlement at the time, and that is clearly not the case as it stands right this moment. So if I would have had this with more time, I would have agendized it. It will be coming back agendized with more detail. Finally, I just want to take a moment to thank Dr. Bob Golton for his exemplary service to Palo Alto, and really just to the whole profession of education. He didn't only work here, but his time here was pretty special. He arrived at the school district in 1996, and today pulled out my calculator. We did a little rough math. We estimate that Bob may have attended somewhere in the ballpark of 700 school board meetings for Palo Alto. Let that soak in for a minute. He promises to watch all future board meetings and use his full 3 minutes for public comments. Actually, Bob, you better not ever do that. But seriously, Bob has been an excellent representative of Palo Alto for many years. He's a trusted advisor, a steward, a confidant, and at his core, just truly a special human being. And Bob is such a great model because he cares about people first and things a distant second. And we can learn a lot from the way Bob handled himself, handled the work, took care of the district, took care of people, took care of the finances, managed our construction project, served as the CBO, the deputy superintendent, interim superintendent, and has been back with us for quite a while. So to Bob Golton, on behalf of the entire district, we're going to miss you. We're going to see you a little bit later tonight. But thank you. We wish you nothing but the absolute best. So that's it for tonight. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Collins.
Thank you. I just wanted to echo two things the superintendent said. One is I also agree. We would not have gotten through. We don't get through any year without our principals, but certainly not the last year. And so, and the work I think our principals did was outstanding, really unparalleled. We asked more of our principals than probably almost any other district in California, and they delivered. So, and I think the beneficiary obviously is our students. So I'm really glad that you called them out, Dr. Austin, and I'm sure all the board members feel similarly. And then briefly on Dr. Golton, I mean, you know, I would not be on this board. I would not be involved in PAUSD the way I am if it were not for Dr. Golton, and who took me under his wing when I joined the bond committee now 11 years ago, and taught me about what it was, what PAUSD was, and what it meant to be of service to the district. And so all I can do is second my admiration for him and respect. He has done every job here with unbelievable professionalism and compassion. And again, the students and community of Palo Alto Unified owe him a debt. Owe him a tremendous debt. So thanks, Bob, and I look forward to seeing you hopefully next week before you leave. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. And I'll echo what you said. And I think it's not out of line to say that the entire board appreciates Dr. Golton. The way that you've really presented the materials and been a really strong presence here. I know I certainly have, even in the short 3 years that I've been able to work with you. So thank you so much, Dr. Golton, for your years of service. All right. Well, let's move on to open forum now. Anyone wishing to address the board on non-agendized items may do so at this time. Comment cards can be filled out at pausd.org/comments, and you can also email your comments to board@pausd.org. All right. It looks like we have 2 members of the public who wish to speak. When I call on you, you'll be unmuted and you'll each have 3 minutes to speak. First, we have Ethan Reyes, followed by Christina Schmidt.
Hi, I'm Ethan Reyes, and I'm a transgender queer man and a 9th grade student in PAUSD. And I think LGBTQ flags should be put up next to the American flags because the schools always talk about supporting LGBTQ community. So I think it should be the first thing you see as well as the American flag. And it's important for queer and trans kids to feel accepted because in studies, trans and queer people have worse mental health. And I think they should be able to feel safe and supported in schools. And the schools always talk about how they support the LGBTQ, but I feel like they need to do more than just say it and show that they're a safe place. And I think the best way to do that is to put up the LGBTQ flags. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment. Next, we have Christina Schmidt, PTA Council.
Good evening. Hello. Thank you for this evening, our last board meeting of the year, and it's been a very long year. I want to join in by beginning to thank our principals, our teachers, our administrators, and our support staff, from classroom aides to maintenance to bus drivers, for your service to our students and families this year. There are many heroes among you that work tirelessly behind the scenes to make it all happen. We also thank the Board of Education, Dr. Austin, and the Executive Cabinet for your diligence and leadership under a microscope of changing restrictions, standards, and lots of public opinion. Regardless of what was thrown your way, you managed to stay focused and fulfilled the important duties that preserved our school's safety and community health while reinventing the wheel, and you delivered learning options for all of our students. Your perseverance and dedication to continue the work of educating and caring for our students is recognized and appreciated. The PTA has been your partner all along the way. Our priority during this crisis has been health and safety of all students, educators, and families. Our volunteers stepped up to deliver computers and food and supported our schools across the district while reinventing fun and engaging activities for kids in a virtual world so that everyone could stay connected. Our mission to promote educational success for students and family engagement with schools has never been clearer. We advocate for wellness, equity, academic excellence, and inclusion. We truly are all in this together. When you prepare for the next school year, please remember what we learned about our students and teachers this year, their resilience and their vulnerabilities. We want to celebrate all of our students, our graduating classes, and rising students throughout the district, and hope that they can take a moment to appreciate their accomplishments. Let's build on these lessons, value the relationships and partnerships within our community, and reinvent the future of education here in Palo Alto. Thank you and have a great summer.
Thank you. All right, and that's open forum. Let's move on to the consent calendar. These items are considered routine and will be approved in one action without discussion. If a member of the public wishes to comment on any consent item, or if a board member would like to pull an item from consent, we'll consider it under action items right afterwards. Board colleagues, is there would anyone like to pull an item? Or make a
I'd like to
motion?
pull, I'd like to move to approve the consent calendar with the exception of item H, which I would like to pull for subsequent discussion.
I'll second that.
Okay, so moved by Mr. Dauber, seconded by Dr. DiBrienza. Approval of the consent calendar without item H.
All right, Mr. Dauber,
Aye.
Mr. Collins,
Aye.
Dr. DiBrienza,
Aye.
Ms. Vladimiric,
Aye.
and Mr. Drop.
Aye. All right, that passes. So now we're on to our action items, and the first thing we'll consider is item H from the consent calendar, which is authorization to issue an addendum to LPA Architects regarding Hoover. Is this, yeah, Mr. Dauber, why don't you?
Yeah, since I pulled it, I can say why I pulled it. I see from the superintendent earlier an email about this item that raises some, I think, important questions for us at the board level about how we think about our budget for elementary schools and construction at those schools, and I think those questions call both for some more staff work to prepare for a board conversation, and then a board conversation that's informed by some more of that work. So rather than proceeding with this contract with respect to architects, I think we would be better off just to defer the conversation until we've had a chance to get more informed.
Okay, Dr. DiBrienza?
So I agree with Mr. Dauber and with the superintendent that more conversation is important about this in general, but I'm not sure that I wouldn't be interested in going ahead and approving this, because I think what the ask is this is a that has, well, long been neglected, or, hasn't had work done in a long time. And there was a desire to do something they didn't think they could do. And now, because of the pandemic and we've got Coverly back, whatnot, they have some different possibilities. And so I think what they want to do is go and is go in and look at some of the possibilities and bring some different options back to us, not necessarily just go in a different direction. And I'm wondering if we can get some information either from Dr. Austin or from someone doing the bond work. Is the general idea of this? Hey, we think there's a lot of different options, and we'd like to do a little bit of work to be able to come back to you with that, with those possibilities later, or is it, this is where we want to go instead? I'm hoping staff can answer that question.
Okay. I say we go around once, if any other board members have questions, so staff can sort of compile them, and then, once more, I would say, because it looked like Mr. Dauber had maybe a response. And then Ms. Latimirak.
Yeah, I mean, to Mr. Brands' point, my sense is that since budget and scope is really at the heart of the conversation that we need to have, it's going to be hard to do design work without that context. And so it's hard for me to see how the architects could understand what we were looking for without more direction, and therefore it doesn't seem to me timely to proceed with a schematic design.
Yeah, that's why I want to know what staff really is wanting to do.
Yeah.
Right. I think they want to bring several possibilities to us, which means they need to sort of sketch one out. But I look forward to hearing what staff has to say about it.
Okay, let's hear from Ms. Latimirak and then staff.
Okay, and then I actually have one quick question, and then I may have more after staff talks. Is that okay? I have a question that's maybe sort of a point of order. I don't know. So in May, right, and I don't know if this is for you, Dr. Austin, or Mr. Holm, Mr. Golton, I don't know. So in May, we voted to unpause the Hoover project and the El Carmelo project and pause the Walter Hayes project, right? And in unpausing, what that did for Hoover was it means we proceed with rebidding the construction project, right? That's the action that we took in May. So I think, what staff is recommending now is that before we proceed with rebidding, we first do some more design, which is being recommended for a number of reasons, and we can get some more clarity from staff. But the bottom line to me is, if we vote no on this item, I think the result of that is that we just proceed with rebidding on the current design, right? Because we can't actually pause Hoover again without agendizing it and voting on pausing it, right? Do I have that right?
So I understand your question. It's actually one I have a little experience with on a very different topic, which I'm not going to talk about. The board authorized or said, okay, we're taking the pause off. There was a formal pause, okay? That does not mean that everything needs to keep progressing. It means the formal pause is off. I'm just giving you a couple potential paths tonight. You guys are going to work this through. If we table this until August or a workshop or some point in time, I wouldn't see that as a pause. I'd see that as time to make a more informed decision if more information is required or requested by the board. Okay. So the fact that we unpaused formally in action does not lead to an immediate need to go rebid the initial proposal. I hope that makes sense. So we had an initial proposal. I'm just going to refresh everybody. It was somewhere in the ballpark of 30 million bucks. We think that number has grown since then for a variety of reasons. So unpausing does not mean that we had to go right into bidding. It just meant, in this case, rebidding, just meant that we were not going to artificially freeze the project.
Okay.
So one last little piece on there. I know it's kind of confusing. It's very possible that the board can authorize us for things that we never do. That's different than directing an action. I think that's probably a more clear answer.
Mr. Collins. Well, I should ask, did that answer your question, Ms. Latimer?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, Mr. Collins.
Hey, first, President Darup, do you want me to raise my hand physically? Can you not see the?
Yes, I'd
Zoom hand?
appreciate that. I can't see the Zoom hand.
Okay, all right, just making sure. I'd forgotten from last time. Yeah, I think I'm just echoing Mr. Brienza, but just to make it clear, I just want to hear what Dr. Austin thinks we should do here. I saw his email. It seemed to raise a bunch of questions and throw some data out there. It sounds like he had thought about it, so I guess I'm curious like what his recommendation is on this so we can digest that. That may have been exactly what Mr. Brienza was asking for.
All right, why don't we hear from Dr. Austin and any other staff members who are participating?
I do have Mr. Holm in the bullpen, but the question you're asking is not about the construction project. It's just to reframe the questions that have come up not only at our last meeting together, but after speaking and thinking about it a little bit. We have some really important questions. And this is a little bit of a chicken and the egg discussion. Do you go and design alternatives, options before you set a budget and parameters, or do you set parameters including a budget cap and then say design to the cap? Well, it's a little different than the way we've thought about things for a while, and I'd say that's not unique to the construction program. That's very much what I've encountered coming to Palo Alto, is that it's not uncommon to say, what is something going to cost? And you come up with whatever that cost is and say, okay, then budget that. Well, actually, you're not budgeting that, you're allocating that. So to know if the board would like to place parameters on the design work would probably save everyone a lot of time, because not a lot of things are certain, but I'm pretty certain that everyone's going to like the most expensive option. And if we don't have a cap or parameters heading into that, we might be setting ourselves up for some disappointment. The other piece is, and this is work that I asked Mr. Holm to get me today, and he did timely and comprehensively as all of his work comes in. I wanted to know if old projects used to cost 10 million, what are the new projects looking like they're shaping up to be? And it looks like estimates on Escondido and El Carmelo were 20+ million. Now, I don't know if that's a lot or a little. And as I've joked with some of you, I still think a nice mattress costs $200, and my wife has to convince me otherwise. So some of this is, I don't know if it's sticker shock. I don't know if the product is wildly different, but I know if our board is expecting each of these projects to look somewhere 15 to 20 million, and they're coming in at 30, 40, 50, 60, that's a pretty significant difference starting point, and your expectations are sure to fall short. On top of this, at $30 million, let's go back to 30 million at Hoover, it leaves a lot untouched. That's just a fact. So right now at $30 million, that would probably not get done enough to where you're all going to feel great about the product. And if that's a decision that we make consciously for all school sites, that we want to have a cap and just know that you're not going to end up with new-ish schools, then that's fine. But I don't think we've had that discussion as a full board. In fact, I know we haven't since I've been here. And, you know, there might be a space where that would make sense. So if you're asking for my recommendation, we can do anything you direct us to do tonight. There is nothing that is so far off base that we can't do it and get it done. If you're asking for my recommendation, I'd table it. And I would table it tonight for a future date. Unfortunately, Hoover is caught up in a bigger discussion at this point. It's more than just Hoover. And it's the last board meeting of the year. We don't come back together until late August. But if you're asking for my recommendation, that would be a recommendation.
Okay. Board members, Any
So I
questions?
move that we table this item until a subsequent board meeting in early fall.
Let's see if there's a second, and then we can discuss the issue of tabling.
I'll second.
Okay. So moved by Mr. Darber, seconded by Mr. Collins to table item H of the consent calendar till August. Ms. Latimer?
Yeah, I think I'm having trouble understanding, I guess, what tabling it would gain us. And so let me say what I mean for a second. I think we're dealing with two issues, like Dr. Austin kind of laid out here. There's the cost of the Hoover project, and then there's the current cost, the realities of elementary construction in general, which have increased exponentially over the past few years, and even more so during COVID. As someone who owns a construction company, I can attest to that. And I think there's understandable concern that this price tag's really high, but I also really think that context is everything. And, you know, to Mr. Holmes' point, I think if basic elementary projects are now going to come in at $30 or $40 million, then this price tag maybe doesn't look so high. And I agree that we probably as a board really need to talk about this sooner rather than later, both in the context of current projects and future projects and bond funding, right? I mean, if elementary projects are $40 million, then what does that mean for the schools that are still on the docket? We only have so many buckets of $40 million, right? But I think why I don't support tabling it is I actually think that proceeding with this additional design will give us some much needed information that we need in order to have this conversation. You know, what I appreciate so much about Mr. Holm and Mr. Golton before him and just the whole team is that I really trust, you know, they don't just design things and then get surprised by what the costs are. I trust that what they tell us their projected estimates are generally are pretty close. So I think if they go through this process and come up with some, you know, multiple different options to present us with, I think in doing that, they're going to have to get pretty realistic about what the costs of construction are out there right now. And then that's going to help us better ascertain what we're dealing with, right? So for instance, you know, so for me, I guess it's not about necessarily just the dollars that you spend, it's the value that you get for those dollars, right? So if you can get a middling project for $30 million and you can get a great project for $45 million, then that's sort of a conversation as a board that we need to have about value for our money. And we're going to need to have that before we vote on how to proceed with Hoover. But I think that spending this money on design gets us some information that I know I will need to be able to have a conversation about the larger, and setting parameters on something, you know, you can't just sort of jump up and down and have a tantrum and make reality not what it is, right? So we could set parameters, we're only spending $30 million, and that doesn't change the reality that maybe we could get nothing for $30 million or nothing that's really going to actually improve Hoover significantly. So I don't think I think us setting artificial parameters on something is, I just think it's unrealistic. I think we need to really understand the costs before we can start talking about budget.
Mr. Dauber and then Dr. DiBrienza.
I just don't think we need to spend $250,000 of bond money in order to have a conversation about what the cost benefit trade-offs are at different expenses for this project. I think that putting schematic design at that, you know, those are real dollars that are not going to be able to be used for something. If we look at it and say, oh, that we love that, but actually we can't afford that, please go and spend another $250,000 on a more realistic design. We've just wasted $250,000. And so I would like to have a conversation at considerably less expense about what we actually can afford and want, and then proceed, you know, to the next step.
Dr. DiBrienza?
Yeah, thanks. So as someone who's on the property committee, I think our property committee agreed to move this forward as staff has requested, and, we've spoken extensively about this in property. And I do think, we of course in property didn't have this bigger conversation, which I agree the board needs to have. And I look forward to us scheduling that for some, probably, in August or September. But I do think that when we have that conversation, it's possible that, like Dr. Austin said, hey, if we see like the big fancy complete overhaul, we're going to like it more. But I don't know that's true. I think that so many of the projects have been different things for different reasons, right? We expressed an interest in redoing MP room and whatnot. But when I look at Ohlone, where my kids go, we got this one other building, right? And there wasn't a whole lot else touched. So that's why that was $10 million. And that's really what Ohlone needed back then. But Hoover is a different animal, right? So I think the conversation has to be had about what we're willing to, how we're interested in spending money in elementary, and given that we have limited finances. But I do think that as staff thinks about this unique property, which is a pretty small footprint, and has been hard to sort of navigate, they have expressed interest in really looking at what are the other possibilities here. And I do think we're going to be able to have a richer conversation if we really have a sense of what the options are. So I think I still support moving ahead with this, as the property committee did and as we brought forward to you all today. So I'm still interested in moving forward with that.
Let me ask a question, then we'll have Mr. Collins, then Mr. Dauber. I guess my question is for staff, Ms. Chow and Mr. Holm, or Mr. Holm. I'd like to know sort of what the thinking is that's developed between the property committee meeting and now, in terms of, what the benefits would be to waiting. And alternatively, I'd also like to hear what the benefits would be to moving forward and doing this, as in what do we lose by waiting, if anything?
So as with most things related to construction, time does have a cost associated with it. This project is no exception. We were hoping to utilize this time over the summer to explore some options for moving forward with Hoover and bring those back to the board in early fall, which would allow us an opportunity to move forward in terms of going out to bid in January and possibly proceeding with construction this coming summer of 2022. Foregoing that opportunity to explore a variety of options for moving forward, best use of the site, and what would minimize the construction impact to students, that work would then not possibly even begin until the fall. And we would not be in a position where we could go out to bid in January. So that would be one of the pros and cons of the impacts of not being able to fully utilize this time during the summer. And did that fully answer your question? Because I can have Mr. Holm give you more, elaborate on that a bit more.
It did. And then the flip side?
The flip side would be, if we are not able to utilize this time to explore those opportunities for how best to move forward with the project, then we wouldn't begin that until later in the fall. We would not be prepared to go out to bid in January. We would not be able to start construction in the summer of 2022. It would add a time delay.
Great. Okay. Mr. Collins, then Mr. Dauber.
I just wanted to clarify and make sure I understood. I guess this is a question for Dr. Austin. I think I heard someone say that staff was recommending to move forward. I heard Dr. Austin, who I think of as the voice of staff, I mean, he's the superintendent, say that he was recommending not to move forward. So I just wanted to clarify what in fact staff was recommending.
Well, I'm going to help you by defining staff on this one as me. So my recommendation is tabling. The rest of the team, I'd say it's kind of a 60-40, 40-60. We can live with either one. I think to be fair, and this is not a knock on anybody. People who are in charge of construction and building want to construct and build. I think that's just a reality, and that's what we want them to do. And I think that there are absolute advantages to moving forward. You've heard those stated. I think it's my job to point out the potential pitfalls of doing things faster than a pace that I may recommend. I'd be happy to be wrong on this one, but I'm a little concerned. I think we're a conversation or two short with the entire board of being in a position where everyone's going to feel like we put our best thinking all the way through it. I also hear Ms. Vladimiric point is well taken, that looking at some more fleshed out examples is beneficial. I actually agree with that seeing these things at some point in time will be beneficial. So in my mind, the question is when? And if we start construction months later, in the history of the school district, that's not a big deal. If you're looking at the immediate snapshot of impact on the current student in that year, yeah, it's more disruptive. But we're going to build a building that will be there for 60 years. So in that regard, I'm not concerned about a little more disruption for us to get it right if this has to get it more right.
Thank you. I mean, I just observe Dr. Austin has frequently, one of the refrains I think we hear from often is to slow down, take a breath, think things through, not the pressure to make before we're ready. And I'm mindful of Trustee Dauber's comment that we're talking about spending $250,000 here. That's not money that comes back. So yeah, I'm inclined to follow staff recommendation on this and pause it until early fall.
And Mr. Dauber was next, then Ms. Vladimiric.
Yeah, I am, well, obviously to follow Dr. Austin's recommendation on it. I hear Ms. Chow's that if we decide to go with, the way I understand that is, if we weren't going to have the conversation we need to have about it, and we were on a happy path where we were comfortable with the numbers, then it would not make sense to delay to have the conversation. But I don't think we're at that point. It's hard for me to imagine that we could say to a design firm, design us some alternatives for something in the range of $15 to $40 million, with parameters that we can't really clarify right now, but we hope that we understand them once we look at your designs. I just think that's putting the cart before the horse, and we should be interested in having a conversation that informs the process, rather than hoping that the process informs us.
Dr. DiBrienza?
Two things. One, as Ms. Vladimiric mentioned and Dr. Austin mentioned, there certainly is a benefit to fleshing different options out. And I'm not sure if we think we're likely going to flesh options out when we talk about this. I'm not sure why we would delay then. Why not, when we talk about this, have those options? I would be interested for staff to tell us, I don't know if there's a set number for this, but delaying this out, as each year goes by, building gets more and more expensive, right? And so is there a cost to, a per month that just relates the price, right? Is there a price estimate month to month or year to year by delaying? Because if it's more than 220 something thousand, then it's a wash there. I don't know if that's a number that's easy to target, if Noel or Mr. Hodges that.
I'm going to look to Ms. Chow. Is there an answer that we can provide?
I think that Mr. Holm would have an answer on the escalation cost on a monthly basis based on the size of project, if we could promote him forward.
I live?
You are.
Great. Yes, I can provide just the guidance that we're using in our numbers and looking at things. Traditionally, over the last 10 years, escalation's been running at about 4, I think it's 4.6%. The current estimators that we work with, we've looked into with them, and they said to use about 6% right now. Looking forward, in the near term, you tend to escalate on a high percentage because that sort of accounts for peaks and whatnot. And right now, we are in a period of uncertainty as far as inflation and whatnot with material prices and such. So roughly looking at 6% annually escalation on a project of this size, it's $100,000 to $150,000 a month. I would also just say that we're part of the study is looking at multiple options to look at also ways to accelerate or potentially even build less. Looking at what is the best solution given that there is a different set of parameters in moving the kids off of campus, and how can we make this project impact students less and bring that range of options back to the board to have these questions that you guys are asking tonight and in a little more of a fleshed out manner.
Thank you, Mr. Holm. Ms. Latimer.
Okay, so just doing that math, it seems pretty clear that escalation costs alone will exceed the cost of exploring options, unless, of course, we don't do the whole project. But other than that, I mean, assuming we're going to do something, we've increased our costs. And I also just want to speak to the point about design. It's actually, I don't know, I think Mr. Dauber might have mentioned this. It actually happens all the time that people say to designers, all right, I want to, budget, what can you get me for this? What can you get me for that? What can you get me for this? And I think Mr. Holm is hearing loud and clear. We would like to know what we can get for what's already budgeted, and then what's the best project, and then is there a cheap project? Is there a duct tape project? That happens all the time in design. And I think that what we need to know is what actually can we get for our money? And that, I think, we have a project here that is ready to bid, and getting that information about what exactly we can get for our money just helps give the context to have the broader conversation about, we only have so many $40 million buckets, but if we can really only get a school for $40 million, that is really relevant to our conversation. So I continue to think it's worth the money, and it would give us valuable information to be able to have the conversation.
Mr. Dauber.
I guess I'm not entirely clear. When I read the item, it doesn't talk about we're going to get multiple designs at multiple price points with multiple different, goals and parameters. It talks about a design. So am I misreading the item? Because it sounds to me like if we vote for the item, we're getting what the item says, not what we've been saying would be great to have, which is a whole bunch of.
Have a design? I'm sorry.
Huh?
Don't we already have a design, a small scale design? Maybe.
So what does it mean here, staff?
I think the item is a little. Your question is right on in that the title of it is new elementary school. I think the way we are viewing this is if there are options to look at with that we have the ability to go to Coverly. So part of this includes a more in-depth study of Coverly and how we could actually use that means for temp campus, for what we call swing space. That includes a more in-depth review of the structural analysis of the buildings, over fire alarms, things like that, to utilize those buildings. And also alternative solutions to campus, the Hoover design and phase. Some of that could be, the Hoover project is designed as a 4-phase project, about 4 years, 3 or 4 years. And look how, we could say, what, board, we come back, we studied this, we can move people, the entire campus, and we can build this all 2-year process. We'll start the project later, we'll build it faster, and we'll impact students less in the course of construction at that. It may be that we can say we'll split it into 2 phases. It may be that we come back and think we should build less, or come back we should build more. There are some other to come up with the architect about how existing structural conditions, and so part of that will be a longer-term study of what we play out in this, and this is also why we need help from our design professionals in understanding. We have a significant amount of this campus that we're just modeling that may come into structural problems in 10 years based on some changes this year from DSA about how they view existing buildings. So we would also, we come back and say, we want to proceed but we need to we recommend upgrades to our modern house to plan for this in the future. The other component is that the existing does not have air conditioning, half of the things. So we may come back and say, proceed exactly it is, but with air conditioning based on foundation that is, or that changed since this project originally was that now we are incorporating air conditioning in the project. So we want to study actually sort of multiple ways of project forward to review next fall.
That's one comment, which is, I hear that answer, but what the answer isn't, it says we're going to consider projects at different price points and produce designs for those. It sounds more like study carbon leads, study different phasings for a project. It doesn't, I hear what other board members are saying, what they would like to see. It just doesn't sound what we would actually. So I appreciate the clarity of that, though, Mr. Hall.
I Robert's observation. That sounded to me like it was more detailed plan, a $40 million project, or ways to add to it, or looking at whole new school project, which on a spreadsheet they got with me clocked in at $6 million as a preliminary estimate. So it didn't seem to me in any way I thought I heard Dr. talking about, which is around kind of value engineering point of view. You know, what do we got or what do we need at our system of schools, and then putting context. So, you know, I mean, if we think it'll speed things up if we decide a path, I agree with the people who have pointed that out. I guess I'm comfortable slowing down and figure what it is we wanted to do and focus our attention on that rather than sending the team figuring out how to do $40 million or $60 million projects before we decided that we really had for that. So that's from Mr. Holmes confirmed that, and it sounds like that's what the actually is.
Okay, Ms. Latimer.
I want to say, I think we have a $1 project, and if the exploration that there would give us, confirm that price, which may be more, give us the ideal price, then you have those two you can't value engineer until you're value engineering from something. So we sort of get the world that we're living with, we get understanding of costs, and then we can start talking about what makes sense to pare down from there. So I think that we, like I said before, have all the conversation that we want about putting budget limits on people, but if the project is going to cost what it costs, we need to deal with that reality first. So we can, as a board, decide in August, we don't want to ever spend more than $30 million. But I would not advise making that decision without understanding how much elementary school cost, because that to me is trying to impose our expertise over the expertise of the actual expert. So I think we need to, at this point, I would my vote would be we get the information, much information as we can about costs, and then we decide financially what we have an appetite for as a board, which may very well be neither of the two or whatever needs we come up with. And then from there, because then that's a different conversation about what are we going to do with Hoover. I'm also in favor of duct tape being a 60-year building together. So it's going to be a very different conversation, but we need what we're talking about first before, from my perspective.
Okay. All right. Well, for my part, you know, it sounds to me, and I'm on the property committee, so I think we've been reviewing this issue for a long time, and I value that time because it's given a lot of opportunity for staff, and when I say staff, I mean the property committee staff, to discuss this item and respond to questions and comments in sort of painful detail. It really seems now that the $150,000 escalation cost will exceed the costs of seeking out design, unless the intention is to pause Hoover or not build Hoover. And what I'm hearing from board members, and maybe I'm creating this thought, but what I'm feeling is sort of an underlying, that is becoming a proxy discussion for the question of pausing Hoover, at least temporarily or in perpetuity. And for my part, I think, the board did discuss it, and the board very recently decided and took action to undo Hoover. So I don't think that's the appropriate, this isn't the appropriate item to discuss that. I think the costs are persuasive. I think the fact the property committee has discussed this sort of ad nauseum, and I don't see that's changed since that time. I certainly appreciate the comments to look at the item as written, which do say that staff is recommending this approval, and whether there was a different discussion of who staff is and who is, and I appreciate Dr. Austin's perspective and his recommendation, and also his acknowledgement that folks are pretty much split on this and willing to go either way. So it really comes down to us. So, the voters approved Measure A to build, and we have Measure A funds here to build. We've paused Hoover, we've unpaused Hoover, and it's sort of been in limbo for a while. I'm not seeing a persuasive reason to go against the property committee's recommendation at this point, but I will ask Mr. Dauber to please go ahead and speak.
I'm sure, Mr. Drop, that you need to mischaracterize my position as you did. This is not an attempt to not proceed with a project cover of caring about budget and scope effect on other elementaries. It's an attempt to ensure that we carefully considering the scope for this proposal light of the whole bond. The voters approved a bond program, the idea that their school board was carefully and prudently administered, and that's what I'm trying to do. So I understand that speculation is otherwise, but just reaffirm that that's my opinion.
Thank you. And I did not mean to cast aspersions. I was pointing out Ms. Latimeric's comment about the escalation, and the escalation wouldn't matter if we were to pause or refuse to build Hoover. So that was where my comment was directed. Mr. Collins.
I feel required to also point out that nor did I intend that claim, and I think it's possible to speculate on the intents or meanings of other. We all speak for ourselves. So my view is that we need to make prudent financial circumstances change, and anyway. I just wanted to point out your characterization did not characterize.
It sounds like we're all in alignment on that issue then, and I'm not characterizing anybody's position, which is great to hear. Okay, the last thing I'll say is I think the conversation that needs to be had that was raised by Dr. Austin has been discussed by members. The broader question, important one, maybe not now, but at a later point, we can discuss whether it's appropriate for that committee with respect to Measure Z, or whether it's something that should directly be agendized and come to the board level. I think, Mr. Dauber, that's something we can discuss in agenda setting as it comes up. But it sounds like there is a motion to table on the table, and so why don't we take that first, and then if there's still a motion remaining, we'll deal with that.
Makes sense. Dr. DiBrienza.
Aye.
Vladimir. Mr. Dauber.
Aye.
And Mr. Drop.
And I'll vote no.
Okay.
So now we have a motion to approve the recommendation. And do we have a motion for that?
Item.
Second?
Second.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Collins.
Uh,
Dr. DeBriant.
Yes.
Merrick.
Yes.
Mr. Dauber. Mr. Drop.
And I'll vote yes. All right, so the motion is as written. And
I just want to point out a rare 3-2.
that's right.
Mark it
And the
down for all your
world
board
did not
watchers.
end. Look at that.
Discourse is alive and well. Thank you, colleagues, for the respectful discourse. All right, agenda item 5A, Local Control Accountability Plan, LCAP.
All right, I've asked Ms. Ofek to give a 35-minute presentation. Okay, that's not going to happen. This is our second time looking at LCAP. In fact, many more than second time, with enormous community and staff input. Really appreciate, again, all the work that went into to this important guiding documents. Ms. Ofek?
Great, thank you so much. So since we last presented this 2 weeks ago and had our public hearing, we revised the final plan in alignment with feedback from the County of Education and all in collaboration around the expenditures with the business office. So what's attached here is the final plan with the final goals for the new 3-year cap.
Great. All right, colleagues, comments or a motion?
Just congratulations.
Nicely done.
All right, well, I'll move to approve. I'll move to adopt the recommendation. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Great, so moved by Mr. Darup and seconded by Ms. Ladimirak.
All right, Ms. Ladimirak,
Aye.
Dr. DeBrienza,
Aye.
Mr. Collins,
Aye.
Mr. Dauber, Mr. Drop.
Aye. Okay, moving on to 5B, proposed budget for 21-22, resolution.
I will proactively state that the news that we shared earlier about Ravenswood will not appear anywhere in any budget right now. There's no change to that, so everything else is going to be as previously presented. But Ms. Chow, you have a line or two?
Thank you, Dr. Austin. This will also be a less than 35-minute presentation. Similar to the LCAP, this was shared with the board at the last board meeting in the form of a public hearing and discussion. There have been no changes to the materials that were posted originally. There is one amended document, and that amendment is, there's no change to the budget, but what we've done is provide a breakdown on the ending fund of the general fund balance so that it replicates the detail that is in it in the attachment for the funds in excess of the minimum ending fund balance. So both of those forms are now in aligned, and that amendment is the amended SAC that has been posted. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Colleagues? Mr. Dauber?
I heard Ms. Austin make the reference to Ravenswood, and I understand why that doesn't reflect that, but is that because our printer go fast enough, or because we don't expect that we're going to see this shortfall? It's why doesn't it reflect it? And should we reflect it? How would you guys our financial position should come to pass? That's a bunch of questions.
I can handle the first part. The second part, I'm going to turn over to the person that actually understands this work, Ms. Chow. But the first part, Mr. Dauber, I expect us to reach a resolution on the Ravenswood issue. There are too many districts involved, and past amendments and revisions to the settlement have occurred throughout time, and according to the county council from San Mateo, Tim Fox, have occurred, I wouldn't say easily, but without a lot of opposition. Legislators want this to work, and they don't want to have a loophole, have the whole thing go down. So I'm very optimistic. It's going to be tense, and of course I'm nervous about it like everyone, but we were told to expect a resolution that would be good for everybody involved. The second part about what happens if I'm wrong, that goes to Ms. Chow. So I'll turn that over to her, and also where this would be reflected, which I believe is first interim.
So Dr. Austin is correct. This would be a first interim adjustment, and I think we need this time between now and first interim to work with our partner districts in San Mateo County to come up with that solution that would alleviate some of the budget concerns for all the districts involved. Dr. Austin and I met with that group on Monday, and it was very optimistic. Nancy McGee, the county superintendent in San Mateo County, led that meeting, and she was already reaching out to the county superintendent in Santa Clara County, as well as some of our partners that advocate for us in the legislature. So I do share Dr. Austin's optimism that we'll come up with a favorable resolution. Another piece of information about Ravenswood situation, their status as a basic aid district, it's largely determined by the supplemental property taxes that are swaying them into the category of a community funded district. There are some nuances to that they received those funds this year because they were state funded in last year. As a basic aid district, you do not typically receive supplemental funds. So once they're categorized as basic aid, they will not receive supplemental. So that money of the supplemental property taxes will be coming in and out for the next couple years. The result of that will likely cause Ravenswood to be a district that what we call flips in and out of being community funded or basic aid and state funded. So we could, worst case scenario, we would not receive the funds in one year, receive them in the next. So it's not a long-term final resolution, but hopefully we can come up with something that will be workable for all the districts in terms of the revenue for the students that are being served in the meantime until a longer term solution can be agreed to.
Thank that explanation. So if I'm hearing is it's not necessary to reflect this in the budget because our best prediction is that we won't actually suffer these financial costs that like we might as of today. In the longer term, Ravenswood could, though, become a basic aid district with changes in properties and so forth. And we do need to either look for a long-term solution or understand the long budget implications. That's kind of my summary of what I heard.
Great. Any further comments? Or we have a motion? Okay, I move to adopt the recommendation as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, so moved by me, seconded by Dr. DiBrienza.
Okay, Dr. DiBrienza,
Aye.
Mr. Collins, Ms. Latimerik,
Aye.
Mr. Dauber,
Aye.
Mr.
Aye. All right, item 5C, authorization to contract with FS3 Hodges.
Items C and D turned over to Dr.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
I've got two items here, and both are for discussion and in a different time of year would be put on for action 2 weeks from now. One is the Hodges contract, the FS3 Hodges contract, which actually done on a year-by-year basis since I think 2003. And the second is a addendum to the LTA contract because we're doing Green Middle School and we intend to do air conditioning for those buildings, and the plan would be to include it in that design instead of doing it separately. So we're asking, as you know, I'm very reluctant to ask for a waiver of the 2 meeting rule, but in this case, we'd like to do it. Incidentally, in previous years, some previous years, we've scheduled separate board meetings just to approve items like this, but special meetings, but we're not proposing that here now. So the first one is the Hodges contract, and we're making a recommendation to amend it, to add to it for another week.
Thank you, Dr. Colleagues, as a reminder, I'll have to waive the 2 meeting rule on this one. Mr. Jones?
I enthusiastically endorse Dr. Golton's suggestion that we not have additional meetings to accommodate this, and that we waive the 2 meeting rule.
Okay. Second?
I'll second.
Great. Moved by Ms. Collins, seconded by Dr. DiBrienza to waive the 2 meeting rule.
All right, Mr. Collins,
Aye.
Dr. DiBrienza, Ms. Latimerik,
Aye.
Mr. Dauber,
Well, I'm tempted to colleagues to the two meeting rule by suggesting a second meeting, but it doesn't sound like I vote for that, so I'll vote aye.
Oh, no on that. That's okay.
Mr.
Aye. Okay, now, that was just a motion to waive the two-meeting rule, as I heard it. So do a motion.
That we authorize staff to enter into act with Hodges to continue bond program management service 2122. Out of not to exceed $68,345 for measure A and $1,252,250 for measure Z.
I second. Okay, so moved by Dr. DiBrienza, seconded by me.
All right, Ms. Latimerik,
Aye.
Mr. Collins,
Aye.
Dr. DiBrienza,
Aye.
Mr. Dauber,
Aye.
Mr. Drop.
Aye. Thank you, Dr. Golden, and also thank you for the next item, D, authorization to issue an addendum to LPA, Green.
Move that we approve the LPA architects as set forth in the, and I also want to thank Dr. Golden for a master in construction management over the years. I appreciate it, and I'll miss it.
Mr. Dauber, before a second, did I hear that you want to approve it and also waive the two-meeting rule?
Or the two meeting rule for this
This
one.
is for the next item. They're separate.
Oh, I thought our waiver covered both of these items. Let me move that we waive the rule.
I'll back you up on that, Mr. Dauber, with a second.
Great. So moved by Mr. Dauber, seconded by Dr. DiBrienza.
Dr. DiBrienza,
Aye.
Mr. Collins,
First, I apologize for my defective prior motion to have covered both of these. I had my motion. My apologies, and I vote aye on this one.
Ms. Latimerik,
Preference would be another 35-minute session about this addendum to the disagreement, but I will vote aye.
Mr. Dauber,
Aye.
Mr. Drop.
Okay. It was both the waiver and the approval.
I don't think so, actually. I moved for the let me now approve the as set forth in the item.
Second.
So moved by Mr. Dauber, by Mr. Collins.
Collins,
I'm glad to see I'm not the only one getting the last meeting of the year here. Aye.
DiBrienza,
Aye.
Ms. Latimerik,
Aye.
Mr. Dauber,
Aye.
Mr. Drop.
All right, and then echoing to Dr. Golden for everything. All right, we're moving past discussion items, of which we have none, to staff reports, just one, structural reorganization of the Department of Equity and Student Affairs.
We have one, and it's an important one. And our high-level overview tonight is a quick one. But certainly as we look into our top goals for next year, we have 5 standout goals, and mental health is one of them. They're non-ranked at this time, but if I was forced to rank, mental health would be number 1. And I've asked Ms. Conaway to shift responsibilities. She'll be heading up a piece of the mental health. We have a team under her. She'll be reporting directly to me now, so we'll be working hand in hand in this work. But I've asked her to walk through what this new team looks like and just hit a couple high points, and we can take comments if you'd like. This will not be the only time you see this item. Sure. So, Ms. Conway.
Thank you, Dr. Austin. One of the great things about turnover is you get a chance to really look at how you're organized, and it provides an opportunity to start thinking about efficiency and effectiveness as we look at the workflow. So as existing team members moved out and some of the new talent was hired, we did get an opportunity to assess our current structure. And it did allow us to, make some decisions regarding the 5 goal areas that you will surely hear more about as in the future. But how do we structure our department so that we can better meet the goals, particularly as it relates to mental health and equity as another segment of that. So a few key things happened. The Department of Equity and Student Affairs, as you know, has been structured since 2019. What we are doing is a fairly simple and pretty intuitive merge between academic supports and student services, bringing that under the umbrella of Equity and Student Affairs. That helps us, kind of at least avoid a little bit of some of the duplicative efforts around student supports. And it also allows us to align our resources in a better way so that our funding is structured enough so that we're all working on the same goals and we're duplicating some of the efforts of people everywhere in this organization. So this allows us to get student services through the lens of equity. And it also allows us to really be creative and innovative about some of those initiatives that will be coming out of the department. So in future, you will be hearing a lot about mental health, a lot of attendance, and we've developed some responsibilities around some of those key areas. So just so that you'll get an idea how that department is structured, Guillermo Lopez, who was originally hired as the lead for the academic support student, originally named academic supports, will now oversee services directly. That would allow Guillermo to work specifically under the lens of but also support those initiatives with the other coordinators that have been put in place. We've, been able to and appoint some key people you really should know about, and you'll probably be hearing from a little later, and that's Anna Reyes, who was the previous Dean of Green, and she'll be serving as a coordinator specifically in charge of school climate. And school climate all includes those areas around attendance, because we know climate impacts whether students to come to school or not and how engaged they are. And she will also be responsible for school climate as it relates to disciplinary issues. And that is not students act up. That's the proactive restorative practices, methodologies that we are trying to the district. So she will be overseeing with that work. Miguel will continue amazing work with our student and family engagement specialists. We were able to build that team up a little bit larger. We gained 2 full-time positions that were able to provide some additional support for our Pacific Islander students and our Black and African American students. So we've been able to identify 2 specific individuals that will be a point person for group need that connection. We've also appointed Rosemarie Dow as our coordinator of health services. She will be working directly with Genevieve Dixon, who will be setting our mental health support. And if you don't know Genevieve, you will definitely know her soon enough. She is a very passionate mental health provider who is already, before she's even signed the paperwork, thinking about ways that she can enhance mental health and wellness in our district. So we are looking forward to really putting some targeted focus each of those key areas and bringing forth some initiatives, both through our ELO plan, our LCAP plan, and our new equity plan that we think will really move the needle. So I think this is a plus for our district.
Thank you for that report. Colleagues? Ms. Latimerek?
Yeah, I just want to briefly say, I was looking at this item and I was struck by sort of how simple and logical it seems. Thinking to myself as I was looking at it, like, of course, this is how it should be structured. And I'm new to the board, and as a parent, I was definitely not an insider, so I kind of had absolutely no idea what the organizational structure of district operations were. And so it's hard to compare this reorganization to the current one or what came for the current one. So instead of comparing, I just speak to what I really love about this organization. And the reason why I think it makes such intuitive sense to me is that, and this is sort of piggybacking on a lot of what Ms. Conway just said, but it really brings all the potential barriers to accessing education under one umbrella. If you think about it, right, like health, wellness, school climate, attendance, discipline, family engagement, all of these contribute or detract from a student's ability to access their education. And we also know that often profoundly interrelated in kids' lives, which can make addressing them in isolation really difficult and too often ineffective. So when I look at this org chart, I see this structural alignment around the whole student, which, purely pragmatically, let alone morally, sets us up to address barriers most efficiently and effectively, I think. And in doing so, really maximize the number of students who can access their education. So I'm extremely appreciative of this operational approach, because, we can have the best academic offerings in the world, but that does nothing for students if they can't access them. So those were my outsider thoughts.
Dr. DiBrienza?
I should probably just say ditto because Ms. Latimerek said it better than I ever could say it. I was also really excited to see them. The interest is what just, struck it for me that these things that we've really focused on and not been able to move on are just so connected to other things, right? If we put those all and Ms. Conway team that's working on all simultaneously and interrelatedly, I think we're going to be able to move the needle. We haven't been able to. And all the, if we focus on all of this and us here, that's going to also help literacy. With all the focus on literacy, we also need to be working on the attendance and everything else. So I'm really excited to see this amazing team you've assembled to work with you. And I know that some in those positions we are losing. I think this is probably Kowski's last meeting with thank him for the year. And I know that Dr. Argumetto is we have the benefit of getting position, but leaving that position, some great new people coming in. And I'm really for it. I think that this structural is fantastic and I can't wait to do with it. Thank you.
All right, and I can't any better than my colleagues, so I'll just echo, but thank you. All right, information items. Colleagues, anything to speak about here? Okay, Mr. Dauber.
Just brief on the item. Just wanted to make a couple of points. Is that I think it really reflects the board's commitment to mental health, that the level of support across the agencies that we do. Those are long-standing relationships for the district that are reflected there. It's really a level of commitment to mental health, I think, for a school district, and so happy that we've maintained that. And the other is, I try to think about this more broadly. So I would include actions that it has taken with respect to as a strong support of student wellness. The counseling alignment made at GUN in particular as another student wellness commitment to SEL generally, and all the work on homework we've talked about for so long, making progress on for that. So I encourage broadly about for wellness beyond big expenditures in the.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. You're muted.
Sorry, I wanted to talk to another item. Do you want me to wait and see if there are more on?
You go ahead.
I just wanted to talk
Hold on
briefly.
1 second. Sorry, Mr. Collins, I saw a hand.
I have one more about this, but I can.
Okay, we'll take Mr. on this item and then we'll speak. Yeah.
I just wanted to say thank you to Dr. Austin and the staff for all the work that went into this report, and also, most significantly, the thought that's going into supporting students and staff as they transition back to school in the fall. I echo Mr. Dauber's statements. We should be proud of the work that we do in this district. I'm glad that we're really stirring this. I want to make just one specific comment, and this is probably predicted. I'm really thrilled to see Student Wellness Council on this as an action our schools are prepared to take. I've said this so often that I'm sure everyone's tired of me say it, but I really think that experts in the experience of our schools, and they have a collective wisdom that we have figured out how to act effectively. And these will sound like exactly the type of mechanism potential to do this. So anyways, I'd love to hear more details about them, and it's probably the time or the place, but I can just follow up with Ms. Conway. Is that who I should follow? Okay.
All right, Mr. Collins.
I wanted to comment briefly on two items. One is the DF report for semester 2. I just wanted to, to me, is a good report. I mean, the headline number of students with DNFs went. I doubt you can find many schools in California that can, certainly unified school districts, that can make that claim, given the conditions last year. And I think it's a testimony to staff's work, the district office, the principals, and the team especially, in making sure our students worked during chaotic where we changed instruction many times. This was easy to accomplish. And so my hat's really off. I don't want to let this pass without noting how exceptional. The other item is item C, the report, where, that's more of a mix, like overall attendance moved. On the other hand, for Pally, clearly something weird happens. 500 kids missed. Looks like 500 of the kids were chronically absent. We also had 7% chronic absence in Park School, exceptionally high for an elementary school, and almost 5% at Duvin Addison. And it was an unusual year, so hard to tell you. And do know that the point person for that initiative is going to change next year. So I really want to urge Dr. Austin to make sure that we don't lose us on chronic absenteeism. I like to think of it as, exemplary attendance as an incredibly important, especially for the students who, needs. So I hope we'll transition that program smoothly to someone who takes a very aggressive stance on making sure that we have specific goals to improve to, and that we make sure that we improve, especially in the areas that the most. Dr. Austin, do you have any plans on how that's going to work?
Yeah, well, thank you for bringing up attendance. That's one of our 5 established, pulled out, called out goals. And we've already met with our leadership team before people left for summer to do nothing but problem solve how they want to lead these efforts in the fall. There are also call outs in all principal evaluations with next year quarterly data reports in front of the full executive cabinet. So we're not waiting until the end of the year to say, how did we do? The beauty of it is the principals also broke themselves into groups, calibrated, brainstormed, and already have things in motion for the beginning of the year. I've never been more optimistic about the beginning of a year with really focused on 5 areas that all matter so much. And some people have asked why attendance. I think coming off of extended closures and seeing how hard it's going to be for some people to get back into that swing, there's, attendance, mental health, and service to others, which is a third of the 5 goals. I can't think of anything that's going to work together more perfectly than those 3. So it's not only on the radar, it's front and center. This is attendance is one of the 5 areas that's going to make a T-shirt. So that's how important it is for us.
All right. Great. Mr. Collins, was there one more item?
No, that was it. Thank you.
That was it. Great. Thank you. All right. Moving on to board operations. Anybody have any board operations? Okay. Before we end, I'll just say that this is the last meeting of the academic year. It's been a very, very uncertain year. We've all expressed our thanks to staff, to principals, to teachers, to classified staff, and then of course district leadership. And I'll repeat that once more. I think I also want to just take a minute and recognize the work that Mr. Collins put in as president at the beginning of this academic year. I think, last calendar year was a very difficult time to be the board president. If the last few months of my tenure have been any indication, it was much harder for Mr. Collins, I gather, and I think he has made my job here that much easier by working to set the train on the rails and sort of wrangling us, his colleagues, having almost weekly meetings at one point during the summer, through the summer last year, and then of course, beginning the school year in a way that has probably never been done ever in the history of education. And of course, while everybody else was doing the work, I think setting the direction for the board that sets the direction is a very, very difficult job to do in such uncertain times. So I just want to really extend my thanks to you, Mr. Collins, and both as a board member and personally, you've made my job a lot easier by setting a really good example and setting the train on the track. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm blushing.
All right. Well, that's it. Have a fantastic summer, everyone, and we will see you in August. This meeting is adjourned.